All right, guys, welcome to another Hangout. This time we are discussing Catholicism, modernity, and the Benedict option. I know I've had a number of really generally appealing live streams, including a debate with Christy Winters and a bunch of other political stuff. Now I'm on a quest to alienate my secular audience, so we're going to sit around and talk about the challenges of dealing with modern culture coming from specifically an Orthodox Catholic perspective. I imagine that we're going to have sort of a rotating panoply of guests. If this is anything like my other talks like this, people add in. They don't usually drop out. But for the first part, I want to keep it really focused. Maybe if we get bored or if we exhaust the topic, we'll let in a few more people just to broaden out the discussion towards the end. So I think to kick it off, we'll just let people introduce themselves. I'll just go from left to right. So we have first another Benedict. Do you want to just give a brief introduction to yourself and your thinking?
Sure. I've got a master's degree in theology, and I've spent 3 years studying in monastic context, two different colleges run by the Benedictine monks, and started reading Rod Dreher really early on in his career when Crunchy Cons came out, and I was basically waiting for the Benedict option sort of ever since he wrote Crunchy Cons, because it's sort of a sequel to that book. So I'm married, I've got a couple of kids, and I work in the tech industry.
Okay, let's go on to Normie Gardner. You want to give a brief introduction to your thought on the matter, just to contextualize it for the audience?
Sure. I'm Normie Gardner. I'm also married and have kids and work in the tech industry. Not that that's important for this context. I think that I come from a background where I lived and grew up in Covenant Catholic communities, so I think I can offer a good sort of like a boots on the ground perspective on this whole idea of the Benedict option on a Catholic community that's we call them covenant communities, because these things actually have existed for some time, and I think I can offer a perspective on what it's like in real life, and there are good things and bad things about it.
Okay, excellent. So then I think next we have Pius, who I do know.
Hello, everybody. To all of you who do not know me, I am Pius 17 from Protestantism. I'm also discerning a call to the priesthood. Although I have not read Rod Dreher's material myself, I am familiar with the man and with the Benedictine option as an ideal. So I believe I'll be able to have some insight into the conversation.
And a newcomer, Sterling, do you want to introduce yourself and your relationship to these topics?
Sure. My name is Sterling Contreras. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Colorado, Denver, majoring in philosophy and mathematics. I'm a convert to Catholicism. I converted when I was 16 from a non-religious / agnostic kind of background. I have read the book, and I'm very interested to kind of talk about the ideas. I'm familiar with the Benedict option as well, kind of from my own personal study, as well as a lot of the history behind it.
Excellent. And then I guess we're left with myself. I'm the distributist. I run this channel. People call me Dave on this channel. And my relationship to this whole question, well, I'm a critic of modernity. That's no secret. I sympathize with some reactionary ideas, and I have read Rod Dreher for a very long time. I started reading him just before my conversion to Catholicism, or I don't know, depending on how you visualize it, back to Catholicism, since I was technically baptized. And I kind of followed his intellectual journey up through writing the Benedict option. And I think my opinions on him have largely changed. This stream, however, is not about Dreher in particular. We're going to be talking about modernity, its challenges for traditional lifestyles, in particular traditional Christian lifestyles. And then I think we're going to be kind of using Dreher's specific take as a sort of sounding board, as a sort of foil for consolidating our thoughts about what to do about it, what are the prospects going forward, et cetera, et cetera. So that being said, I think that the first question we have before us is really the problem we're dealing with. And, if people are tuning in and looking at this in the context of Rod Dreher, we're talking about really the problem of modernity. So modernity is a period of time, really, I think it usually describes the 20th century in particular, in which high technology and high communications have created mass culture, mass communications, popular lowbrow culture. And in the wake of that, you have a declining relevance of declining power of authority, a declining power of tradition. And in the wake of modernity, there have been an enormous number of problems, an enormous number of issues that have arisen. So that's really the problem we're dealing with. And people might ask, well, what's the problem? Well, the problem, I think, is sort of manifesting itself in our modern era, right? People are more disconnected. They have less understanding of themselves and history. And I think there's a lot of spiritual family problems that arise from that, just in addition to this massive cultural problems. A lot of people like Sargon of Akkad and the skeptics who are much more popular, they view the emergence of the SJW as something entirely new. But to people who are broader critics of modernity, this is just the next step. So I guess I'm just going to ask the people here, I'm not going to go around it, but anyone who wants to answer it, what do you see as the problems of modernity? What are your particular issues with it? How do you think it intersects with people who are pursuing traditional lifestyles and are trying to pursue the virtues of Christianity in the West, or the virtues that the Christianity in the West idolized in the past? Go ahead.
I have some thoughts on that too. Sorry.
Okay, so Normie, do you want to go first, and then Pius?
Yeah, I think
sure.
I think it's important that we don't blame all of our problems on the technology. I think that the problems are more philosophical. I think one of the root causes of our family problems is contraception. I think that's pretty clear the more you look at it, for example. And that nothing to do with the internet, nothing to do with technology. I think that, in my perspective, is just because we are disconnected, but we are still all connected with Facebook and with social media, it's still a way of connecting with people, and I think it's really easy to blame it on that. So I think that it's easy to do that, and we should caution against that and look at the deeper causes of these problems.
Well, I mean, technology definitely had a component of these issues coming about, right? I mean, the idea, a sexual revolution just could never have happened prior to the advent of progesterone-based.
By the way, that brings up the point that I wanted to make.
Go ahead,
can I go ahead?
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is, I think one of the biggest issues for Christianity in general, and I wouldn't even say Christianity, but for the preservation of culture, would be the over-sexualization of every single aspect of society. Yes. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's some sexualization somewhere. Our comedy is infested with it. Our entertainment it's everywhere. You can't look anywhere and not find a sexual joke or an innuendo or some sort of advertisement for sex. I mean, it's gotten to the point where our children are now being sexualized. I heard that I believe one of the young princes of England was branded like an icon of gay rights or something like that. I mean, the 4-year-old prince of England. At this point, the sexualization has gotten far too out of hand, and I believe that's one of the aspects in which the Benedict Option can be looked at in a positive light, is separating yourself from society obviously separates yourself from that sexualization that's been forced upon us.
Absolutely.
And that's an interesting point, right? Because this instance, right, when we're talking about the mass sexualization of society, heading into the modern era in the Victorian age, we saw that there was sort of an increasing fascination with sex, right? And people like Freud, said that the reason why there was this increasing fascination with sex among the intellectual classes was that we had been repressed, right? And so all throughout the 20th century, the people who were experiencing this increasing sexualization of culture, their most popular excuse was that there was a saturation, that their culture was sexualized because our sexual urges had been repressed. And if our sexual urges were unrepressed, then we would no longer have a culture obsessed with sex. And I think that the last 20 years in particular has just shown the lie of that particular theory. Nobody's claiming that anymore.
No, definitely not.
That's true. And also, Freud talks a lot about neuroses. He said that we would be less like mentally disturbed, like having less neuroses. With, if anything, we have a lot more.
Yeah, I don't even know what neuroses mean. So
the mind.
So I guess I mean, we're drowning in SSRIs, right? I mean,
I think
I just took a survey of like people in my immediate friend group, and I couldn't find a single one who hadn't been on SSRIs, or was on them currently, right? SSRIs are an antidepressant, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They're one of the most common antidepressants on the market. So, and this is just, the statistics demonstrate this, just an enormous increase in antidepressant prescriptions.
I was thinking about this, the Christian attitude towards sex and, the excess of sex. Like you look at what happened in the Roman Empire and the reaction to, the Desert Fathers, there was a reaction against sex as well as for sex, in a sense. And in that case, the early church had the job of having to balance between those two, like reject both extremes, of hatred of sex and obsession with sex. And that's something that's going to be really important for, any Catholic community to have the balance.
Yeah, I think the thing is that, Catholicism has been Christianity and Catholicism have been looking at for a way to resist these trends for a really long time. And it's just been unable to actually succeed. I think that to a certain degree, if we discuss modernity and what it's brought about, we have to at some level discuss the failure of traditionalist communities to resist this.
Traditional. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could say secular culture hasn't resisted it. That's
it's secular culture was allowed this to happen.
Yeah, in some sense. The question now is where does it? In some sense, secular culture has allowed it to occur. It's harder for me to just immediately fasten on why, or what particular things secular culture did, other than just not confront the consequences of the technology that were being introduced fast enough.
Well, I really think it's all about technology, though. I mean, the cause of this.
What?
Do you really think it's all just about? No, I'm not. I know you're not saying it's all just about technology, but I'd like to explore, like, what aspect is technology and what aspect.
Well, I mean, pornography wouldn't be so readily accessible had the internet not been.
But pornography wouldn't be. I think that the porn culture comes out of contraception culture, where
I agree. Contraception is what's opened the doors to all of this.
Yeah.
Well, but then let's discuss the technological aspect, because this is important. And I know in my debate with Christy Winters the other day, she had this point that. That there were fluctuations in human sexual behavior in previous eras, and that was one point that she certainly was right about. But the thing is that there were these boundaries. It was like there was a gate on exactly how permissive a culture could get before the invention of progesterone-based birth control. You just couldn't have 1920s with 72% illegitimacy rate in any community. The community would have collapsed in on itself, right? There would have been immune responses. And technology suppressed those immune responses, essentially. It allowed us to obtain these different lifestyles without having to really answer to the consequences. And I guess we haven't completely escaped the consequences, but, a different set of consequences.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the all the effects we see of the sexual relation. Have we really escaped the consequences? Like it seems like the consequences are really bad. The illegitimacy rate that you brought up, for example.
Oh no, we haven't escaped all the consequences, but we've escaped the ones that would require secular society to immediately respond to.
Yeah, exactly.
An illegitimacy rate of above 20% in the 20s. The society would have had to immediately respond to that in a very real and very forceful way. But now, we've got illegitimacy rates of almost 80% in some communities, and sites like, well, guys, you really shouldn't. It's just
Europe as a whole is secularizing extremely quickly. The population of Europe the rates of theism are dropping massively, and I say as a result, the culture is getting more and more degenerate.
Oh yeah.
Well, that process has already occurred in Europe, I'd say.
Yeah, Europe is gone. It's gone.
Oh yeah,
definitely. How could it get more? How could it get more? I suppose it could get more secular than it already is. But I guess the difficulty here is that we're kind of struggling with options, right? And this sort of I've talked to a guy called Mark Citadel, people who haven't caught that live stream, and I think that the main approach that Christians have had to the problem of modernity that we're talking, it's not just sex either, right? It's also just relationships, right? I mean, like,
I've heard a quote. Oh,
sex is all about relationships.
No, yeah. I've heard a quote somewhere. I can't remember who said it, so don't attribute it to me. But it was what was it? Ask someone what they have to offer in a relationship besides sex, and you find they won't have much else.
Well, not just romantic relationships, right? People have less friendships, right? People have fewer lifetime friends. People, we're less close with our families than we used to be. We're less close. The community cohesion is out the door, right? People are less cohesive than they used to be. Robert Putnam did a very good book called Bowling Alone, where he looked at the decline of American bowling leagues between the 1950s and the 1990s. Marked drop off in almost every single metric of actual community participation. So what you have emerging out of late modernity is an incredible atomization of the individual.
Yes, that's true.
But where did that individualism come from?
I think the breakdown of the family is the biggest part of that. I mean, it really is. I mean, sometimes the answer is simple in that case. I know that sometimes we talk about individualism, and I think it's a kind of a vague term, individualism. I've heard people try to link, like, I don't know, things like the American Revolution, individualism that's the cause. I don't think it's that deep philosophically. Personally, I think it's a breakdown of the family which is causing that atomization that we see.
It is a little bit of a chicken and the egg, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, I just don't. Sometimes I don't think it's a philosophical problem as much as it is a sin problem. Just.
Well, but if that's the case, then why are these trends occurring now? I mean, people were sinful in the Middle Ages too. I mean, human nature hasn't changed. I would say.
Well, yeah.
Is what allows people to be so widely.
Yeah, I don't think it's an easy.
Well, it's so easy for people to spread immorality now with social media being so readily accessible. And I mean, like, maybe in the Middle Ages people would do it behind closed doors, but it wasn't socially acceptable to make crude jokes like it is now, I'd say.
I think there's different there's different temptations for different ages, to be honest. And I think that sex is a temptation of this age. And in other ages, there might be other temptations that we aren't as like plugged into, because if they were so great back then, we're good then. I'm not saying that.
In another age, it was the temptation not to shoot a peasant with a flaming arrow from your face. I really shouldn't.
But
that was as readily available as pornography back in the day.
Flaming arrows.
Flaming arrows and shootable peasants, right?
I mean, honestly, slavery. No, that's not coming back in the Western world. I don't think. That was something that obviously people had to struggle with in the past. And we could say it's because they had less technology, but honestly, the causes of, like, I'm just saying there's different temptations for different ages. I do think that that's important to keep note of. Just because it's just, humans can fail in so many different ways. It's not only one way we can fail. So I guess right now we're responsible for the time for our temptation.
So somebody in the chat's asking what the Benedict option is, and I have a way of introducing this, I think. So we just, before we get into that, I think we've overviewed that modernity, technological increase, and the collapse of tradition has resulted in a lot of problems, but most of the problems focus around a declining community, a declining development of the individual, an increasing atomization, an increasing isolation, and an increasing neuroticism, and of course all of the panoply of sexual and family problems that go along with those issues. And we could argue over what came first, the chicken or the egg, or who's the original vampire, to use a terminology that I like to use, but we still have the question before us. Now, the Benedict option, okay, so I think that there's a lot of ways to react to change, and the classic way that the Christian churches have reacted to the changes of modernity or the challenges of modernity have been in a conservative mode. And the conservative mode really tries to slow things down. It tries to say, this change is bad for society, so we're going to make sure it goes as slow as possible because we are invested in society and we want to preserve this change, right? We want to make sure that whatever this sickness is, society doesn't catch the sickness very badly at all, right? It's mitigated. Conservative mitigates the problems. However, due to a number of developments, and we could talk about these developments if we wanted to, we've been left in a situation where most traditionalists and most Christians do not see themselves as directly invested in society, or they believe that the changes that they used to try to slow down have already been accomplished, that there's really no turning back. And so the mode has really turned from being a conservative one to being what someone like Mark Citadel would call a reactionary one, right? That we are not invested in society. This is not our society. Our society is elsewhere. We are essentially searching out a separate piece and seeing what might come from what develops post this change. And this can take aggressive formulations, this can take passive formulations, but that is really the core of the change that's occurred in the conservative approach to these issues. And the Benedict option in particular, it was originally used by an author called Alistair MacIntyre in his book After Virtue, which everyone here should read. And he described essentially what we did, the decline of virtue and the concept of virtue in the West. And his option was to essentially say that the only way through this is for small cadres of individuals to try to retreat and rediscover the virtue of the West, to try to find the great moral heroes in the spirit of St. Benedict. And so a modern author and blogger called Rod Dreher, who's formerly Catholic, now Orthodox, resurrected this idea and wrote a recent book about this Benedict option, in which he purports to show a plan for confronting modernity by essentially creating a separate piece, a separate traditional piece that operates under the radar of traditionalism. So I apologize for dominating, but that's my long-winded explanation. Any corrections there?
I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah. I think that was a perfect summarization.
Yep, pretty succinct.
So, but do you think, I guess I don't know, there's a lot of people here I've never talked to before, the transition away from conservatism to reactionary thought, I think that is one, but that is going to be one of the hallmarks of our political age, is that the right went from being conservative to reactionary. I think it's a necessary change. It's a change that I more or less support, even though I don't always agree with the proponents. What are your opinions of that?
I think it's important. Go ahead.
Oh, I think it's something that needs to happen, as mainstream conservatism is capitulating to classical liberalism and libertarianism in general. The Republican Party in America, for example, is capitulating to things like gay marriage, which it used to hold vehemently it used to be vehemently opposed to it. On moral issues, the mainstream conservative parties and organizations of the world are failing to take stances against them, and instead are capitulating to them in favor of a libertarian classical liberal stance on it, which hasn't been working, as we can see from looking at society now. The society is dominated by leftist culture because conservatives are too wimpy to put any force into opposing them.
Okay, I guess the question is, can they? Right? I mean, they're wimpy because everyone who's tried fighting against this in the way they have fought against it has been utterly destroyed.
I think that it's important to not have the Benedict option, think of it purely in terms of political terms only, because what we're really talking about is Christians preserving their faith, and Christianity is always a relational thing. I know I'm going to sound like a hippie in this bunch of traditionalist guys, and I'm traditionalist myself, but it is important to know that that becomes more apparent when you actually live through a Catholic covenant community. It's important to know that it's deeper than mere politics. I know that we all know that, but I just want to remind everyone that it's important to think of it in those terms as well, because it can be damaging. Catholic community can be damaging just as much as the outside world can be. There's just the temptations are just different, and so the reality is that you have to it's work. You have to work out your salvation either way. Benedict Option can be very good. It also can be very bad if it's done wrong. I've seen it happen in both cases.
Well, you actually have had experience trying to implement this.
Yeah.
Can you explain this a little bit further?
Absolutely. So, I grew up in 3 different communities as growing up, and now I want to say about this. All these communities overall were good. I'm not going to tell you any horror stories about cults or anything. These are all normal communities in the sense, and they were all actually overall good for my development in my faith and in my my intellectual foundations. I grew up in a covenant community and a ecumenical community when I was a teenager. When I was in high school, I went to this very strict covenant community, which is very isolated and most Benedict-like, And when I went to college at Franciscan University, which also had aspects of a community in it. We had households, we separated ourselves from the world. And in all cases, there's dangers, and there are people in each of those places that left those communities because they didn't fit in and that sort of thing. And there were some rules that I thought were a little bit too strict, and maybe it's just my own pride, but I didn't like them very much. So I guess the point I want to drive home with this is that it's once you we're always looking for it's always tempting to find a simple fix to this problem that we have, but the problem is not simple, and the fix isn't going to be simple either. Benedict Option is not a simple fix; it's a vocation. And if you join a Catholic community, a covenant community, it can be wonderful, but it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of you have to stay in the straight and narrow even there. It's not like your sins or your temptations or your imperfections, to put it in more secular terms, go away with joining the community. In fact,
any intentional community will be incredibly difficult. Any intentional community will be incredibly difficult to maintain.
Yeah, I mean,
there's an alt-right YouTuber that said something that I thought was very, very true, and he said, the secret strength of liberalism and progressivism is that nobody wants to live under the virtues of the 19th century or with the lifestyle of the 19th century. But the secret truth of the right is that in some ways, biologically, because he's an atheist, this guy, we need to be living with the virtues and lifestyle of the 19th century, or something older than that, perhaps.
One of the things that, an example of, I guess, how that virtue can become tyrannical is, I'll give you an example, is in one of the communities I went to, they outlawed all rock music. And now walking away from this, all you guys got to know about this community and I feel bad doing is that all they're going to know about is that they're weirdos who ban rock music. There was so much more to the community than that, but that alone caused a lot of conflict because I understood why they did it looking up all rock music is bad, only Christian music here, but at the same time it did more harm than good. And striving for that virtue, they looked for a simple fix, just ban rock music, or didn't make any sense to me at the time when I was a teenager. But in striving to do that, it did more harm than good in that sense.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm done.
Well, I was going to say, I can understand that. Usually when you talk, especially when you talk about banning vices that people are very attached to, such as, I've mentioned bannings, or not banning, but saying that people in the community should, in the traditionalist community, should stop making sexual jokes. And I've seen a lot of opposition to that, people calling me a Puritan and stuff. So, when it comes down to it, trying to ban vices for example, rock music, which is debatable as a vice, or the things that people have a close attachment to that can be classified as vices.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
say this. Oh, sorry.
People are always going to call you a Puritan when you do that. And the difficulty is finding a way to change the culture in a way that doesn't make you look like a Puritan or like a dictator. Because the moment that people identify you and start calling you like that, you're going to have your public image ruined, and no one's going to listen to you.
But here's the thing: like a lot of these things that we're talking about being harmful, like the sexualization of culture, the way that sex seeps into everything.
Yes.
And when it comes to dirty jokes in particular, I think that's more of a context problem than anything else, right? I mean, it's not so much that you're trying to get rid of bodiness, but you're trying to restrict it away from the sacred objects, right? That's the challenge, right?
My issue is that. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask one more thing? I think that one point is important to make is that if the point of a big part of the Benedict option, I think, would be separation of yourself from the world, from the outside community. You have to remember that you don't need to do anything other than be a faithful Catholic or Christian to do that. You stop using contraception, you have 4 kids, all of a sudden, guess what? You're separated, buddy. I mean, you're the weird Catholic guy who's got the 4 kids already. So you don't need to do much to do it. So just being a good Christian or trying to be a faithful Catholic or a faithful Christian, that alone will separate you, whether you like it or not. I mean,
That's a good start.
It's odd to be, like, in my experience, it's odd to be a 17-year-old who's living in the midst of the sexual or the post-sex revolution culture and to want to be a priest. I mean, people ask me all the time why I want to be a priest and why I want to give up, sex or the possibility of having sex. And people are really surprised by people who want to give up sex. I can't remember who said this. I actually think it was Fritz, but he said the most sexually deviant thing in culture nowadays is actually abstaining from it.
Well, there is this whole they're trying to add asexual to the LGBTQPICQ whatever, the list of the rainbow of sexual orientations that are protected classes.
No, I think
well, it's not not having sexual attraction. It's having attraction and abstaining from it because you want to be give it up for the Lord and to give it up as a sacrifice to God.
No, in a lot of ways, yes, I agree with you. But what I'm saying is that I think that what you're going to have though is that progressives have a difficulty conceptualizing chosen sexual identities. They understand choosing gender, but they don't understand choosing sexuality. It's kind of like the mirror inverse from the Christian point of view. So they don't understand the idea that you could choose to do something with your sexuality. It's only ever something that's instant on you.
It's ruling you. You're not ruling it.
Well, that's what the culture tells us.
Yeah, that's because the culture thinks we're animals and not rational.
I'll say this: the culture thinks it can rule us by smuggling all of its machinations inside identity and inside the definitions of words, right? People are trying to rule us through the control of identity and language. And the use of that in sexuality is one of the most insidious ways they've been able to do that. I haven't made a video on this, but I think I probably should because it's really fascinating. But,
One thing that I thought was interesting that Normie said, he was talking about, like, just being a faithful Catholic will separate you from the rest of the people. And I think that's actually the point of the book, The Benedict Option. I think that's what he thinks, and I think he's wrong. You have to have a lot more than just being the faithful Catholic guy that everybody knows. You have to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, like, the papal bulls, but there's one where Unum Sanctam, which is about the 2 swords and how one sword is for the one who wields the power, like the king, the ruling, the state, basically. And then the other one is the church, and the church is hierarchically over the state. And that's, I think, more a key to it than just being faithful in itself. We have to go to where we're first a Catholic and then we're an American. We're first a Catholic before anything else.
Oh, I agree with that. I think that any Catholic should agree with that. That you're a Catholic first and foremost before anything else.
But the issue is not disidentity. The issue is the fact that, well, I talked about this a little bit. If you're in a community and you're resisting, you naturally, unless you're incredibly strong-willed and you're thinking about it all the time, you naturally flow over to the consensus point of view.
Well, yeah, you know what? You're right. Atomization. If you're alone by yourself, you won't be able to hold fast. Definitely. That's why I think families are the first. I mean, we're talking about these communities. All the communities I was in, it was all led by a core of strong families, and the men in the families, especially, like large, strong families. That was like a 30 or 40 guys. Those are the people who started these communities. So when we're talking about these communities, we got to think of not just in terms of individuals binding a community, but groups of families coming together, working together. And I think that anyone who's involved in parish life or involved in raising their kids, you're going to find these families of other faithful Catholics. Well, I hope that you do, because it makes it a lot easier to lead your lifestyle.
But this creates the... I'm sorry, go ahead.
They kind of spontaneously form. That's what I'm trying to get. The point I'm trying to make is that they do spontaneously form in the sense that...
They spontaneously form?
Oh, that's not the right word I want to use. The basic one I'm trying to say is that, for example, I'll give an example of my own life right now. Me and my wife and our kids are in a homeschooling commune. And the people that are on the commune, we all joined because we wanted to homeschool, and we were faithful Catholics, and we were trying to be faithful Catholics anyway. And we didn't ever make a decision. We're doing the Benedict option. We're joining a community. We're doing homeschooling together, and people of like minds came together. I'm not saying it was spontaneous. Obviously, a lot of work went into it, but these things, if they're looking at the Benedict option saying, how are we ever going to do this strange esoteric thing? I see these things happening already in the church right now. I see these things, these communities forming already. And that's I guess that's a good thing, you know?
Well, the real challenge is going to come intergenerationally, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
That is always the real concern, right? Because the loss of communities. I mean, conservative traditionalists have always had stronger communities. They've always had more children, but the loss and the attrition has always been communicated over the bridge between the generations, not in the production of individual generations, which is what one of the major deficiencies of the approach kind of is, or there's a lot of unanswered questions there, right?
I think I can ask. I can address that too. Being a cradle Catholic, who has grew up Catholic, and the way I got my faith. I mean, obviously everyone who's a cradle Catholic who's still a Catholic will have the same, or other kind of Christians as well. You know, at a certain point you make a decision on your own to stick with this thing. And for me, and for a lot of people, I'm sure it's the example of your parents and of your older siblings and the people that you admire being good Christians themselves and providing a really good example. So it is possible to pass on the faith. You can't save everyone. It's the ends of their decision, but a lot of people you can keep it going as long as people are still being. I mean, honestly, I feel like a broken record, but it's really just honestly just being good Christians and being good people and being virtuous, and that's why I stayed my faith.
But okay, now sorry. I have a lot to kind of react to that.
Sure, absolutely.
And this is always the issue. This is there's this blogger Leia Labresco who read Rod Dreher's book, and she said something like, "Well, Rod, she's very, very friendly. I'm a huge fan of hers. And she's much more friendly with me. I'm much more fiery and pessimistic." And she said, "Well, Rod, it sounds like the Benedict option is just being a faithful Christian." And that's all it is. And Roger is like, "Of course, that's exactly what it is. You broke the riddle." And she's like, "Oh, that's so cool." And I would have been like, "Rod, I want my $32 back."
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, is this just bottled water? Like, is this just like, is this just like taking what I already had, bottling it up, putting a good name on it, and then selling it back to me for no exorbitant
I don't think it is
price?
enough. I mean, I think he's wrong, isn't he? I mean,
I'm not saying it's easy.
I think that's one of the biggest weak spots in Rod's book is that, when before the book came out and he met down in DC with Ken Myers and had the conversation down there, and he said, "Well, what's this Benedict option about? What can we do?" And the two of them were, putting out these examples of like, well, we can read a poem or have dinner with somebody. And I'm like, this is the Benedict option. Saint Benedict didn't go out in the desert and have dinner with people and read poems. Like, this is, I've said this a couple of times on my blog, and I feel like, the fact that I've said it like 4 or 5 times now, I feel like a broken record, but it's the Benedict option. I mean, yes, it's based on MacIntyre's quotation, and yes, that's, MacIntyre, more lately has sort of disavowed that quotation and, sort of wished he hadn't said it because it gets taken out of context and, quoted ad nauseum. But, there is something to, pointing to Saint Benedict and saying, if we're trying to resist, some of these more corrosive and atomistic aspects of modernity, and looking back at our Christian heritage, there was a certain radicalism and a certain similar kind of decadence that Saint Benedict walked away from, and having spent a fair amount of time around monks and monasteries and sort of having lived that to a certain extent without being inside the cloister, there's really something to that.
I agree. I think that's important to also note, in addition to what you're saying, not in contradiction, but in addition to what you're saying, is that St. Benedict and all these communities were oriented towards Christ. And that was really, it wasn't like it wasn't simply just rejection. It was rejection of the lesser for the greater. It's a rejection of the crap for the gold. You know what I mean? And that's really the appeal.
Hey, I just wanted to clarify. We're discussing Benedict of Nursia, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's not only that they were focused on Christ, but it's the way in which they were focused on Christ. I mean, the Gnostics were focused on Christ. I mean, the Arians, perhaps even more so than the Orthodox Christians, were focused on Christ, but they were focused on Christ in the wrong way.
Well, yeah, they essentially believed that Christ was like a demigod, right?
Yeah, they were
were they adoptionists? No, they weren't. They weren't adoptionists.
Well, regardless of the details of the first century heresies, some of Dreher in particular, of it's just Christianity, or insert your kind of.
Well, Christianity is a very complex.
I feel that's a very flippant answer for somebody who read a 300-page book.
I mean, Christianity is a very complex.
I don't. Sorry.
And I was just going to point out, just Christianity is a very complex thing and a very hard thing to do. So it's a way of doing that.
Not just specific. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's rendered even more difficult because of the fact that the modern world is turned against us.
Yeah, exactly. There are specific problems with the modern world that we have not confronted yet, right? We have not confronted a lot of issues. There's a lot of just intellectual work that's needed before we even can go just get to work, right? It's like, I don't know. It's like handing somebody 2 halves of a broom, right, and then going like, oh, sweep the yard, right? Well, that's fine, but the task is not to just take the individual halves of the broom and try to sweep. You need to mend the broom and then sweep the yard, right?
I agree, and I want to make sure I made myself clear what I was saying. The reason I would talk about Jesus in this sense is that we always got to make sure we orient ourselves in that direction before we, as a base. That's all. Obviously, there's plenty of intellectual work to be done. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm saying, but yeah, I totally think that getting to work and being faithful is useful. I oftentimes think that platitudes about that are substituted as an excuse not to do the necessary intellectual work, right? And I see a lot of Christians repeating things that have not properly been updated in the modern context, using arguments that were really, they're not taking into consideration the culture that we live in right now.
Could you give an example of that? I would love to hear.
I am glad you asked, because I have this excellent article right here, and with your permission, and I know I've been dominating this conversation, but I like throwing things and hearing you react, and it takes longer to throw these intellectual bombs than it does to react to them, because I think the reactions have been shorter. So in the particular era of apologetics, for people who are watching who are not Christian or Catholic, apologetics is sort of the aspect of defending Christianity, or we're evangelizing, converting people in an intellectual bent. And And Christians sort of pride themselves, unlike Muslims, about having a lot of really intellectual apologetics. Muslim scholars, for the most part, don't care about highly developed arguments that can be used against secularism. At least historically, they haven't. But Christians have felt very, very proud about their apologetical history, and with going to people like Aquinas and whatnot, and a variety of other very, very intellectual thinkers, both in the Middle Ages and afterwards. But I think apologetics in the modern age have been disastrous. I think the interaction with the new atheist was disastrous. And I think that a lot of them have not taken into consideration how modernity has worked. And so this person, Bruce Carlton, he said there are 6 problems with modern Christian apologetics. He says, the first one is that paganism is absent. Christianity is a much bigger jump from secular modernity than from paganism. Christianity seemed like a completion of paganism, a step or two further in the same direction on what was already being said. Souls and their survival beyond death, the intrinsic nature of sin, the activities of invisible powers, and so on. With moderns, there is nothing to build on except perhaps childhood memories or alternative realities glimpsed through art and history. 2, incomplete. Modern Christianity is experienced by converts tends to be incomplete because modern Christianity has nothing to build on. This means that modern Christianity lacks explanatory power, seems to have little or nothing to say about the main problems of living. Modern Christianity seems to have nothing to do with politics, law, art, philosophy, or science, and seems to inhabit a tiny shrinking realm cut off from daily concerns. Christianity often deletes miracles, original sin, the virgin birth, incarnation, and the dual nature of Christ, Holy Trinity, angels, and demons, and so on. Yet without these, Christianity does not have anything to hang its hat on and does not satisfy human yearnings as they appear in the modern age. 3, shallowness. Modern Christians tend to feel shallow. It seems to rely on diktat and scriptures. This is because moderns lack the basis of spontaneous perceptions of natural law, animism, and the acceptance of active supernatural power. 4, Judaism is absent. Modern Christianity has to do without centuries of the Jewish tradition, developing an understanding of the nature of law. And 5, just 2 more. 5, in confusion, I think the last 2 are the most important parts. Modern hedonic life is distracted, drugged, and consequently, oftentimes people feel unclear about the nature of life altogether. On top of this, in recent decades, prevalent ruling culture has been actively against the good. Modern art is anti-beauty, modern philosophies are anti-truth, modern morality is an inversion of the natural law. Propaganda, implicit or explicit, inculcates the spontaneous ideals of human native religion with the notion that these are wrong. And 6, anti-Christian inoculation. Our ruling culture now explicitly inoculates people against Christianity and the prerequisites for Christianity. It supplies ready-made arguments grounded in modern materialistic hedonism to be used against all evidence or steps in the argument that might lead to Christianity if rigorously followed. Christian apologetics cannot advance one step without eliciting these slogans. Modern impatience, distractibility, and a short attention span does the rest. And the 5 and 6 are in particular just devastating. Anybody who tries to talk about modern Christianity in the modern world will come against Confucian and these sort of slogans that inoculate you against the prior beliefs of Christianity. And so this is just one example of Christian apologetics. This has been true for 30 years. And none of the intellectual groundwork has been done to confront a lot of these issues. Instead, it's just ramming the same apologetic arguments into the machine gun nests of people like the Amazing Atheist. I mean, the Amazing Atheist hasn't had like a coherent thought in his entire life. And he's able to just blow these... I mean, okay, don't get me wrong. TJ is a funny guy, right? Don't get me wrong. He's a good comedian. But he is not a thinker. And yet he's just able to sit down and throw out slogans and discard, these masterful thinkers of the ages.
Oh wow, I have so many things to say here. So like one of the things, yeah. So I agree. I would love to know what it seemed I would love to define the first. I think I've read this article before. It sounds familiar. I remember thinking at the time, what exactly does he mean by modern Christianity? In some instances, it seems to be a sort of a more liberal, wishy-washy Christianity, Unitarian, Episcopalian, and some of them was like more like fundamentalist Christianity from a different tack. But
I think a
just
lot of these critiques apply to one but not the other. True. But
yeah, but
there's
this is
some that
one thing I
apply
want to
to
say.
all of them.
Yeah, like I do have to say this, that distributors, when I first watched your videos, one of the first videos I watched is when you challenged what's the guy, Vernaculus, on his critique of the Peter Kreeft and the moral argument, and I was just like, this is what I've been waiting for on YouTube forever. That's what needs to be done. That's the apologetics you need, because you totally refuted his argument, and you did it through apologetics. And I don't know. For me, that was like the one point I wanted to make was that I hadn't seen anything like that in a while. It seems like Christians sort of abandoned YouTube, and that's on us to not do.
Well, I'm not so sure though, man, because Vernaculus has like thousands of subscribers more than me, and if you were to set him up in a room with the slogans versus the arguments, the slogans would win at 80% of the people. Well, I've had this argument with a variety of people.
Slogans work better than arguments because they're quick and fast, and people can just.
Yeah, I'm going to reread that last part here, right?
People's attention spans are so ridiculously slow that, or so ridiculously short that they'd rather listen to just the slogan than the actual argument.
I'm going to reread this last sentence. Christian apologetics cannot advance one step without eliciting slogans. And then he says, modern impatience, distractibility, and a short attention span does the rest. Right?
Look,
yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I agree. But the thing is that the work can be done, and I don't think traditional apologetics, and the traditional arguments have lost their power. I think a lot of people have not heard them, and we do have to work to provide them.
Oh, this is just dead agreement at this stage. I think that pretty much, if the Christian community on YouTube had the followers of the New Atheist movement at their behest, we would have no problems. Like, the Amazing Atheist has 1 million followers. Aaron Raw has 200,000 followers. I don't know, maybe he doesn't have that many, but he has a ton. And do you know what the New Atheist people love doing? They love watching debates of atheists versus Christians. Believe me, they have all heard the cosmological argument for the existence of God. The thing is that this involves complicated notions of philosophy that oftentimes they don't understand, or presuppositions of their own argument. And so they've heard these arguments. They just do not have the sophistication to go back and understand that like on the 16th line of logic, there's an error. I assure you, most of the atheists online have heard
but they have heard them, but they have not really heard them, is what you're saying. Like, they've heard them, but they don't understand them, which means they haven't really heard them. And I'm not saying that's an easy
solution.
They? Sure they can. I mean, the fact that they're listening is a step.
No, I don't know. I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, this is the thing, right? People, you can rewrite arguments like so a person who's an Aristotelian can immediately pick up the basic idea of the cosmological argument, because it's only three spaces of logic, right? A, B, C. Humans do pretty well with 3 lines of logic, right? A person who's a scientific materialist, in order to refute scientific materialism, you need about 7 lines of logic, from a modern liberal scientific materialism to show the contradiction. That means to get from scientific materialism to God, you need 10 arguments, 10 logical jumps. I'm approximating here, but you get the idea. People tap out after 4, most people, right? People who are mathematicians can do 7, 8, or 9 if they're really focusing. You're talking about the human capacity for developing lines of logic and jumping through them is limited, and it's very limited the further up you get.
And people get bored really fast. I
guess you're right. That's all correct. I'm thinking about the people, like, if I was someone, a young teenage Christian who wasn't really well versed in my faith and was getting tempted by atheists, like that video. If someone who's actually interested, they're not people who get distracted, they're bored, it's because they're not really interested in the topic. If they're just there to see like an atheist pawn a Christian,
Well,
but if someone is searching, that's
I'm going to push back on this because I'm super interested in mathematics, and I read a summary of Girdles' Incompleteness theorem. I'm sure Sterling knows this one, right?
Yep.
It's the modern. Maybe you're probably much more advanced in mathematics than I am, being just a simple engineer. But
I'm just a guitar player. Sorry.
yeah. But I mean, this is a modern proof with sweeping implications for computer science, philosophy, and mathematics. It essentially proves that any formal system large enough to describe numbers as we know them cannot possibly have every statement proven or disproven.
Exactly.
It basically,
which means that mathematics can't be a formal system.
Mathematics, well, it's a formal system. It can't be a complete formal system.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay. The proof of this proof is approximately 20 lines of logic long. I've read it about 3 times. It still feels like magic to me. It feels like magic because I can't hold 20 lines of logic in my head at the same time. And so, if I were to be honest, even though I've read the proof, even though I've explained the proof, at this moment right now, the reason why I believe the proof is authoritative.
Exactly.
I'm illustrating this quantity of you know.
Well, I think that the problem, and I kind of agree with you, Dave, that so the reason why people can't study formal philosophical arguments is because they don't understand philosophy and how philosophy works and how it's different than from they don't understand how science works anyway, but they don't understand philosophy too. And it's not even like, if you read St. Thomas Aquinas or you watch The Amazing Atheists takedown of Thomas Aquinas, it's the most ridiculous thing you'll ever watch.
My blueberry muffins.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most ridiculous thing you'll ever watch. And anybody who's familiar with Aquinas,
muffins are non-contingent.
I think we got to take a zoom back a bit, just zoom the camera back a bit on the bigger world outside of YouTube, because as big as the new atheists are and as intimidating they might look in the YouTube world, the big problem outside of that is not really atheism so much as it is like sort of like bad Christianity, like all the
certainly.
So if we're talking about how we change society with the Benedict option, we should look probably outside of just YouTube, because there's a different set of challenges there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't help but look at YouTube atheists and say, in a different age, you would have been the defenders of the faith, right?
Yeah.
It's all of these kind of like, I'm sorry, guys. I know I don't mean to bash people with autism, but what I really mean when I say autism is monomaniacal eccentrics, right? Who are myopic monomaniacal eccentrics, but that doesn't sound good for the jokes. So what I wanted to say is so much of like guarding institutions is just like taking control of an institution and then like putting at your front desk like 5 autistic bean counters who are gonna like stickle you for the rules, right? And can't see like bigger arguments, because like every argument falls apart if you zoom out large enough and like question the assumptions. So so like a lot of the problem is that like you're arguing with people who are just so myopic they can't see the larger case. And and classically that's I think you see sociologically in a lot of systems, that just having these people who are very myopic, they play a very valuable role in like the life cycle and maintainment of an orthodoxy. But sorry, that was a pet theory. But I agree. Apathy is the big apathy and laxness is the big problem outside of YouTube, right? What I lament in YouTube is seeing a lot of people who would fight the apathy not being loyal to what I think is a much healthier ideology.
It's very painful to watch, and I've been immersed in YouTube for years now, so I have to remind myself of that too. That there's a bigger world outside of this battle we see here,
Well, and I think that the part of the problem with intellectual apologetics is that that's always going to appeal to a minority of people, and throughout human history, most people haven't had the education or the interest to pursue those kinds of arguments. And so, I think probably the most compelling Christian apologetic is when, Paul says to the Corinthians, the litmus test in all of this is to have the other people say, see how they love one another, and not how they can perfectly argue their cosmology, because that's you get you start clashing philosophies and ideologies, and that can just go on ad nauseum.
And that's the one thing you can't fake, right? That's the one thing you can't fake.
Well, and it's interesting. This actually, Dave, bring this to my attention. The whole idea of the narrative. You have to control the narrative of what Christianity is to the masses. Like when I first started watching your videos, and you talked about that, how leftists control the narrative and they have the better story. That sometimes can win the argument. And what we need to come back to is kind of, and you need a culture to do this. You need some, like a whole Catholic culture that reinforces these values so that you control the narrative, you control the story.
Yeah. I have to say one of the biggest problems with making, with the Christianity versus atheism nowadays is because everybody wants to live a life of immorality, at least for the most part. Everybody and because the culture reinforces this desire to live an immoral lifestyle filled with sex and drugs and and I hate to sound like an evangelical Protestant here, but I mean for the most part the society does reinforce those. The society does for the most part reinforce those things.
Dirty evangelical Protestants, man, jeez.
And it's difficult for Catholicism as a whole to exist and perpetuate its moral values and especially perpetuate itself in the younger generations when sex and drugs are and things alike to them are broadcasted so vehemently through the media and through culture.
That's a constraint, right? The question is, I think the approaches that were taken previously, the sort of let's slow down the culture, it's just not working. Radical steps are needed at this stage, right? I'm talking about radical acts of goodness here, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be something that's going to be easy. It's not going to be something that meshes into the primary culture.
Sure. I'm not saying it will, but I just think... Or sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and finish your thought. I jumped in.
Oh, I was going to say I'm not saying it will be easy, but it's going to be extremely difficult right now with the way the culture looks. One of the biggest priorities we should have is changing the culture first to represent a more Christian lifestyle.
Yeah, but then what is the culture then? Like where does
secularism, sex? I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty self-evident, I'd say.
I mean, it sounds like we're talking about bellowing the cat at that stage. I mean, secularism is at this stage. We're talking about secular mainstream culture is the cat. We are the mice. We are getting eaten by it.
Exactly.
I mean, it'd be nice if secularism had a big fat bell around its neck, but we don't really at this point have a contingency to do that, I guess, right?
I mean, I think it does, though, doesn't it? I mean, we know where secularism comes from. We know we have an idea of how to fight against it, and I think.
We do have. I don't know. Do we have a good idea of fighting?
I think we do.
Share, please share.
Okay, so one of the ideas that. Okay, so why was secularism not a huge problem in the Middle Ages?
Because you mean the thousands of reasons?
I mean, if you really.
There was one primary reason. I mean, there's one real primary reason. There was no such thing as Protestants.
Well, okay, but
we can't. Martin Luther was the founder of individualism.
He was.
Thanks for coming back to that.
We can't. We cannot blink out of existence Protestantism.
Yeah. We can't pretend.
I agree. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
We can't say that it never happened, but. It was Martin Luther. Not only did he found the concept of individualism, but he also simplified the concept of God.
Theistic personalism. Yep, exactly.
Yes.
Yep. If you don't have classical theism, God is basically another individual. He's just another.
Yeah. No, he's your friend.
He is your friend.
How does this transition away from "I wish the Reformation never happened" to I know how to defeat modernity?
We need to let's get off Protestants and let's discuss back on track.
There's a lot of things I wish hadn't happened.
Yeah.
But I think that is on track.
Well, okay.
I mean,
then we
explain,
can
please.
Yeah, please.
Well, I think if you're looking to take this back maybe to the Benedict option and to root it back in Dreer's book, the whole of chapter 2 talks about this, intellectual history going back to nominalism, and the Reformation is right in the center of all of that. And when you talk about a shift in culture, and if the basis of culture is the religious practice, then look at what happened with Christianity and religious practice beginning with the Reformation. Look at England. Look at the United States. I mean, the United States is the first sort of native Protestant culture in the Western world. Like, compare that to, historically speaking.
The question of this is what started it is not the same thing as the solution for how you fight it.
Context is always important, though. You have to see where it came from to see where it's going and how.
Let's say that I grant that it is Protestantism that's the original vampire. Now, what's the step going forward?
If we're talking about regenerating culture and religion is the basis of culture, then perhaps there's something within Protestantism that is corrosive to culture and corrosive to human flourishing.
Right now, Protestantism is not your issue. It's post-Protestant.
It's
post-Protestant, secular, Marxist-influenced progressives.
But is that always the case? If you look at the mainstream Protestant denominations, they're the ones straight off of Luther. Those are the ones that are secularizing and liberalizing at a much higher rate than something even like evangelicals are.
That they don't control the culture.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of members, and a lot of the people who are members are just paying lip service in like state churches, like in Norway and Denmark. While I agree that Protestantism has many problems and that we can critique them, this really isn't the place to do it.
Well, I don't know. It is if you can get me an actionable item on the table that has anything to do with Protestantism.
I mean, I am a convert from Protestantism. I left the Lutheran Church.
If there's something actionable here, let's go, right?
But maybe our target shouldn't necessarily be secularists. It should be Protestants.
But we're gonna start a knife fight with like evangelicals in this.
No, what I'm saying is that we need to take the faith, the Orthodox Lutherans. I mean, maybe some evangelicals, because some of them actually have crossed the Tiber. I'm trying to think. One did very recently, but if we can mass at a faster rate by converting Protestants than by converting atheists and secularists, I think that's an actionable. So it's something that we can
again.
do.
I would dead disagree here, right? Because Protestants, if you spend your conversion energy converting Protestants, they're themselves declining, right? B, they don't control any of the main power in society, right?
But I don't think it's about.
I don't know.
I think maybe a better target than the Protestants would be the Freemasons. But
I don't know, but you don't look here.
Guys, sorry.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Go ahead. I wanted to ask Ed.
Did you want to come in?
Yeah. I just wanted to keep in mind, like we're talking Protestants, talking Freemasons. There is a doctrine. Can you hear me really well? If you can't,
yes,
let me
we
know.
can all hear you. We can
Good,
all hear
sorry.
you.
We want to make sure we want to make sure that we talk about the subsidiary, and like the real way of changing the culture is going to be just one person at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time. It's not going to be an easy fix of. I mean, I know that we're trying to discuss these topics. I'm not disagreeing with you, but all the time keep in mind that like it's not going to be an easy fix for this. It is going to take just work, and sometimes just like working one community at a time, one parish at a time. That's really where culture changes. Just keep that in mind.
Well, and
yes, I think before we get on Protestants, we should fix the massive amounts of liberalism that infest the American Catholic Church. I mean,
yes, yes.
While I love my parish, I mean, we have like rock music in our masses. That's not acceptable. We have,
really? Are you being serious?
Yes, we have rock Christian music in our masses. Yes. I mean,
There are definitely some loss of sacred music.
No. Let me tell you, I've been chastised by my church, by my priest, because I received communion on the knees as an altar server because I'm setting a bad example for the rest of the parish.
Yeah, that's dumb. I agree.
So we're talking.
That's pretty liberal.
I love my parish
So
and I
I
love the
think-
people there, but I mean, if we're really going to start critiquing liberalism, we need to do it from the inside of the church before we focus on Protestantism. I agree Protestantism is an issue, and I converted from it for a reason, but I think that the biggest issues come from inside the church first. That's just the point I wanted to make.
I would agree with that. You know, I can't think of a single pathology that is exclusively in Protestantism.
I mean, I don't like Martin
Arguments.
Luther. I hate Martin Luther. I don't like the Protestant religion, but I mean, at this point, it's not the issue in the current topic. I mean, it is.
I think that we like if you're as a Catholic, I take things out of. If I see the Protestants doing something better than we are, then I want to know what I can learn from them, and without keeping in mind, obviously, the orthodoxy of Catholicism. You know what I mean? Like we should look for, you know, the good and what we have in common. I'm sorry to sound like a hippie or something, but you know, like, I mean, but anyway, another thing to keep in mind, I think too, is as well, no, I lost my train of thought. Never mind.
Well, I don't know. I think that insofar as the problem is solved by converting a specific population of people, it is the upper middle class intellectual urbanites who are largely secular in their persuasion. They're the ones who consume culture, they pay for culture, they patron culture, and you know, they're a large population.
You know, what's our goal with the Benedict Option? Like, what's the end goal if we're talking about this? Like,
the end goal is to actually carry forth. I think that we're, you know, I kind of agree with the reactionary point of view that what we're seeing here is we're seeing a bottleneck. Modernity is coming to a close. Progressivism doesn't have any answers for that. I mean, liberalism doesn't have any answers for it. So what we're saying is that the music is about to stop, right? Before the music stops, however, it's going to get really, 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 really loud, right? A lot of people are going to drop out. And, you know, you want to be sitting down, right, when the music stops. So we have to get through this period as modernity accelerates itself. Survive through that period, and that could be a very long period. It could be very short. And then be able to have some ability to rebuild.
I see. You want us to wait it out, wait out its lifespan, let it die, and then fight back the moment it starts to go on the decline.
Well, I think that I think that this is another thing about retreating. Any good retreat is an attack, right? A retreat that is not itself an attack has a name. It's called a rout. Right? You are always moving in aggressively to another location, even if that location is behind the lines of where you were previously. That is what active, intelligent groups of people do, right? And so that if you're interested in saying, okay, where we are right now is not sustainable, which I think for the most part it is not. I think it's not sustainable on the larger level, and I think that where the church occupies relative to the larger society is also not sustainable. And you need to actively look about expanding in a different direction that's radically different from what you've done previously. It's going to be aggressive, but you know, it is also going to be defensive.
It might be helpful to listen to just recall the original Benedict Option and how it started and where it ended up too as well. Like
go ahead.
Yeah, like well, no, I wanted to open that up. Like during that, I think that you guys
explain. We're live, so explain.
So yeah, okay. So for example, like you know, Saint Benedict started the Benedictine order at the end of the Roman Empire, as the Dark Ages were starting, and the Roman Empire was being overrun by barbarians, and they withdrew from the world in monasteries. They preserved the culture that came before them. They preserved their faith. And as the High Middle Ages came back into and civilization was reestablished, they were able to found a Christian civilization. Now, of course, what happened after that is past the end of the Benedict Option. Now, we should look at the differences between then and this time. I don't think we're going to get an invasion of literal barbarians, for example. I don't think so. I mean,
we might.
We might, but let's assume that we won't, just for the sake of this argument. How is our option going to be different from their option? I mean, we're not. And is anyone saying we're going to go into monasteries? Obviously, like that.
We have to contend with modernity and with mass media, which the Benedictines did not have to do in the original one, which is why cultural creation is so important.
Yes.
But contending with mass media is fairly simple. You turn off your cell phone, you turn off the TV, you turn off the radio. That's a relatively easy thing to do.
You control it in your own home, and
right?
And you arm your children and your members of the community with the with the faith and with the intellectual and spiritual gifts to be able to withstand this sort of thing. I mean, that can be done.
So what we need to reconcile this, because at one hand I'm saying that the solution to mass media is to permanently turn it off, but then I've also heard people say that we need to master mass media as a means for communicating, networking, and evangelization. And unfortunately, those things are mutually exclusive. In their extreme form, those things, you need to be able to sort of draw a line here around this, right?
No, I think it's a both and. I think you've got to, you have to judiciously filter, but also recognize that mass media is a tool. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, it's a tool that can be used for good or for ill. And I think the trick is to filter the garbage and use it for the good. That's the both and. I think that's the resolution right there.
I think what we should ask is, are either of those options even achievable, though?
I think that they are. Not easy, but it's not easy.
WTN.
Yes.
That is true. That is true. Although, let's be honest, though. I mean, I don't think anyone really watches EWTN besides Christians.
That's a good thing. If we get Christians that are not Catholics to watch it, that's a good thing, because that's culture. That's culture right there.
Well, it's
to see what you would like. If you buy achievable, like to conquer, like the EWTN is the top 40 network and everyone's watching it. No, that's not achievable. But
no, it doesn't have to be though.
Yeah, exactly. You
guys, let me put it this way, guys. I think, there's a little, I always kind of get this feeling that there's a little sort of the sense of congratulation, like what we're doing is already working. What we're doing is not working. Okay, I'm sorry, it's not.
It isn't, no.
I mean, define working.
So like EWTN was an amazing piece of work, and I am in utter awe of Mother Angelica. I can't say enough good things about her. But what was constructed in EWTN was not a adequate reaction to what occurred in the time frame of its construction. Right. I mean,
but I don't think anybody's making that argument. Nobody's saying that that's sufficient. Something says that's a part. That's a point. That's something that we can add on to a bigger effort.
Yeah, exactly.
It can't be just one thing.
This is another thing, too. Not to bring these guys up, but there's kind of the elephant in the room. Despite being heavily stigmatized by almost every element of the mainstream media, and much more stigmatized than any Christian denomination has ever been, and also being against modernity, the alt-right has been able to create an incredibly agile online activist force that would be the envy of any Christian organization out there.
Yeah,
so I'm saying that there are things that we've done that have not been sufficiently explored, and what we've done in the past may not be. I'm saying that there's work to be done here, right?
This is the thing, though. I think that you might be a little bit blinkered there. I can't say that, because here's the thing, okay? Apologetics online, we talked about that. That's one piece. It's not sufficient by itself. EWTN media, that's one piece. It's not sufficient by itself. Raising your kids properly, that's one piece, not sufficient by itself. But you know what? We're called to do each of these pieces as best we can and be faithful. There is a sense, I wanted to say this for a while, that we have to be careful. We're talking about what we can do to change the culture. Guys, we're Christians. We're not the ones who are doing things. That's not our job. I mean, we're doing things, but we're cooperating with grace. We're cooperating with God. So we got to keep that in mind, too, is that we have to be faithful and we have to do as best we can and not lose hope. That's basically what we're commanded to do.
But I'm putting on the floor as if you're not missing something, right?
Yeah, I guess
you're saying, well, we got the wheels of the car and, we've got the drive shaft and we've got the seats. And yet when I turn my key, nothing's going, and it's because you don't have an engine, right?
I think the car is running underground, and you can't always see it online. For example, the alt-right is a big online presence, but I mean, that's online is not of the real world yet. That's not even the whole.
I agree.
You know what I mean? we got to be careful that we don't focus too much on one aspect of this picture. I think the Benedict option in growing things is a lot like gardening. It's like my thing, gardening. And it's a lot like slow and patient work, and you're not going to see easy fix. I know I keep saying this over and over again.
Oh yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean? So it's important not to lose hope. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm just saying that, if there were Benedict, the original Benedict, to go back to that, he thrived because he had a bunch of really young and excited people who were ready to set off on a long journey.
But that wasn't true initially, though. When Benedict left Rome, he left by himself and spent 3 years in a cave by himself. That's an important.
The years we're experiencing are the years in the cave.
Maybe
potentially, but I think that piece of the puzzle often gets overlooked. We characterize Benedict as founding a religious order. He didn't. He went out and, in a response to live a radical call to the gospel, just as the monks for 300 years before him had been doing. He left the decadent society, and it was an interior focus. And he was not concerned about outcomes. He was not concerned about followers. He was not concerned about even really where his next meal was going to come from. If you believe the story, he wasn't concerned about those things. And, there's been a lot of the conversation tonight has been this concern about outcomes. If I do this, then X has to happen. Or, if I do this, it's not going to have X outcome. And it's like, if the thing is worth doing, to quote Chesterton, then I think it's worth doing badly.
I agree with that. I'm not going to, even if we're doomed, even if there's no hope, I'll still go to church, I'll still praise God, I'll still work, I'll still love my. I'm just asking though.
You have a good point with the alt-right, and that did bring us something like.
No, I'm wondering.
Well, here's
you guys.
I see what you're saying.
I feel. Well, hold on. Let me say it then. Are you guys? I feel like in some sense, it is what you guys are saying is very pious. But in another sense, it's also very easy, right? Because it seems like you're saying that the status quo of the church isn't somehow. I think the status quo of the church needs a radical action, and we need some experiment. This is I think one of the great things that Pope Francis said was we need to make a mess of things, right? I think that some bold new experimental actions would be very. I would be interested in seeing them because I think that everything you guys are saying is true. But I feel that I think the time has come that we need to start trying some things that are different and sort of out of the wheelhouse of what we've been attempting.
I think that's true.
I see what you're saying, but I would also answer that what I was saying I think is not easy at all. And it's also it seemed what I'm trying to say. It's not it's not easy, but it is simple in some senses. That we are called to do things that are hard and tedious and heady, and that's basically what's going to be the point I was trying to make. So it'd be great if we have a radical change, when a good example of this. Sometimes it'll happen, but I think that if it does happen, it'll happen not through our own actions. I just want to give an example out here from history. Guadalupe, later Guadalupe, Aztecs, Cortez conquered. They conquered the Aztecs. There was slavery. The population of the Aztecs was not converted to Catholicism. Lady Guadalupe happened. The apparition happened. There was a mass conversion of Mexicans to Catholicism, and to this. That happened. That was a radical action, right? That was a radical change in the culture. But look where it came from. It didn't come
from God.
Yeah, that's hard to say. I don't like that. I wish it was like that, but I'm trying to think of historical examples the same way.
It does.
My point. Sorry, Pius. Let me just say this really quickly. Oh, go ahead. How about you say?
No. Sorry. No, you go. Go. Sorry.
Okay, so here's my issue. I'm going to go back to the broken broom thing, right? Doing hard work is hard, but shouting "do more hard work" is easy. Right? if you're in the position of a laborer whose only job is to move forward and do the hard work, then hard work is what's before you. But if you're a manager and you're looking at your laborers who you're responsible for, and your job is to think up ideas, like to actually direct them to be leaders, and you see your laborers sweeping the ground with pieces of broom that have not been repaired, and your solution to that is shouting at them, well, it's your job to do hard work. Doing unergonomic work is not working hard is not an excuse to seeing someone doing something incorrectly, and it doesn't absolve the intellectuals of doing their job. And the job of the intellectuals is to ask if this particular hard work is intelligent.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of like this conversation is very good. It reminds me of like it makes me think about the religious orders and how they were founded and how they had a different take on the same thing. Like there was a change, but it was a change on different theme of the same music, like, and I don't know, maybe that might be a productive line of thought. Like, look at Francis, how he changed the church, but with a different take, very radically different and very charismatic, but at the same time, going back to the same message. So, what do you think about that?
One of the problems with when you mention like these kind of movements that we want to, I think you want to emulate, Dave, is that they're inherently unstable. Like the New Atheism movement, that thing collapsed. It collapsed when it started to come in conflict with any other reactionary group.
That's because it's empty.
I agree, but I mean it's inherent. But a lot of the members are members just to be reactionary. That's a problem.
Oh, they're members because they want to feel smart and not make any commitments.
You mean New Atheism? Yeah, New Atheism. I feel like a lot of people just become New Atheists just because it makes them feel like they're more intelligent than everybody else. I mean,
I have zero. Sorry, go ahead.
No, finish. Go ahead and finish.
I have zero respect for the New Atheists, and though I disagree with you. Okay, but
even Sam Harris
speaking.
Yes.
There's some exceptions intellectually. But that's
I like Sam
my
Harris.
point. I wasn't finished with the point exactly. My point was this. I disagree with the alt-right, but I have respect for their balls because their opinions are highly stigmatized and they still get out there and make radical proposals. That's harder work than putting the nose to the grindstone on the status quo.
All the New Atheists do is they just look for Christians who are already a stigmatized group in society and just berate them even more and then act like they're.
And New Atheism was never stigmatized.
No, it never has been.
The alt-right was, and they went against that. And I admire the bravery. I don't agree with them, but I admire their bravery. Right.
To be fair, New Atheism is pretty heavily stigmatized in academia and actually in feminist circles too as well.
New Atheism was not stigmatized. I mean, Christy Winters identified as a New Atheist.
No, it's never been stigmatized.
I don't know. In academia, they get pretty big ridicule.
I'd say Christians are far more stigmatized in academia than New Atheists are.
I don't know. At least in the literature, positions that are orthodox positions are taken seriously. New Atheists are not taken seriously.
I'm talking about social stigma, not how well we make the arguments in some abstract academic sense.
Academia is a real community. It's not like some invisible hand. It's something that it should be considered because academia is where a lot of these atheists think they got their ideas from their professors. If the professors have a more respected, more sophisticated view, as opposed to in the 1930s, 1940s, where Christianity was not acceptable at all, then I think that's a major success.
I guess I wanted to clarify something else too. Dave, you talked about the status quo, and then I was like, I wasn't really going for that sense. What I was trying to say, I guess, was that the changes that we have to make might take a lot of work, and we might not have a hope of seeing the end goal of it, but we still have to keep on doing that work, and the end goal could be amazing. It could explode on us and become beautiful. But
I agree with you that it's a big job, but the fact that it's a big job does not excuse us as leaders to essentially set the people who we're guiding onto work that could be done more intelligently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there, like for example, for the alt-right, you're right. I watch Tara McCarthy a lot. I don't know why, something else fascinates me about her take on things. I don't agree with her at all. I still like watching her, but she was talking in recent videos about like mentoring people and like building a community outside of the internet. Like they're serious about that, and they are building a community in that sense and trying to like connect with each other, and they're visionary in that sense. And so
I envy that. I envy their visionary bravery.
Not a good vision, though. In fact, I think it's
okay, but
dangerous. I mean, I know what you mean. Though.
We're talking about, you're talking about resisting modernity. Resisting modernity is for the brave. And you're talking about capturing cultural institutions. Capturing cultural institutions is hard work, but it's for the brave. It's for the people who get out there, and do this stuff. I would Taylor McCarthy, who is an Orthodox Christian, would be a huge achievement, I think.
Yeah. So, is a Benedict Option really resisting modernity, or is it just, holding up, withstanding?
I see it more as waiting it out.
Well, see, I don't think waiting it out is sufficient, right? I think waiting it out is, when people look back on the Benedict Option, what they'll see is waiting it out. But what it will involve for people actually living in the situation are thinking outside the box, being aggressive towards injustices you see in the modern world, obviously not exposing yourself more than you need to, and not giving into vainglory, obviously, but it'll be dynamic, it'll be in motion, right? It's not going to be turtling.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think if it is turtling, it's got to be turtling for a purpose.
Yes.
That there has to be, you're withdrawing to achieve, greater interior peace, interior freedom, interior control. And you're not worried about a political ideology or a philosophy or a program, because you are aware that you're in need of this transformation involves a certain distance from culture.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about the Benedict Option is that that's always been the case. It's always been, St. Benedict, St. Dominic, St. Francis, St. Bernard of Clairvaux, like all of these saints across 1,500 years of history have, withdrawn, in one way or another, in order to return stronger to do what they need to do as Christians.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about just now was drawing back on my own personal experience in these Benedict-like communities. And one of the things that I went through a lot of rough times earlier in my life, and a lot of times, and I totally fell away from the faith. There's one point in my life where a couple of years I was totally naive practicing, but I never thought to myself that I never really doubted the existence of God, or really doubted that the Catholic Church and that was where I was supposed to be, even though I wasn't doing a good job of it. And I think the reason I always had a very clear vision in my mind from my growing up of something that's really good and glorious and beautiful. It was never that picture and that vision was always in my mind because of the communities I grew up in and the faith that I saw my parents and my siblings have. It was appealing to me. Trying to say, it called me back. And if anything else, having a community that's really following Christ, that vision is what kind of draw people. If nothing, it was, and that's really what's drew me back in my sense, and that's why I'm drawing my own experience in this sense. We're talking about resistance and turtling, and those are I totally get that. But what drew me back was the vision and was the experience of Jesus. I always knew about it. I just wasn't faithful to it. But that's what the option did for me, and perhaps that's what the power will be.
It's also nice. Oh, go ahead.
I'm done. It's good.
Oh, well, what's nice, and it's good that we have a live experience right here, like somebody who actually went through this. what's nice about being Catholic and all these kind of things is if we do take this option, we really outbreed them quite extensively, which is nice. Like, if you look at like the options for faithful Catholics, people who go to church regularly, our numbers are way higher than the average population growth. So if we did retreat like this and we tried to isolate and retain as many people as possible, it's not necessarily a net loss.
The issue, though, was actually getting people to do it. I mean,
Of course. I mean,
how many Catholics will want to separate themselves from the modern world that they're so comfortably integrated into?
Mhm.
That's the thing. Like, if you have that, when I look at the modern world and I look at the Catholic Church, there's no question for me which is a better place to be, a happier place to be.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what
I
I mean?
agree. But,
So you get,
but no, I agree. But I'm going to tell you the majority of American Catholics will not. I mean,
exactly. That's why, absolutely, I totally get that. I mean, that's why the community for me was so important, and that's why I am getting for these communities. And you know, I guess when I talk about hard work is that just to, guys, to let you know how hard the work is to found and to join these communities and make it a good thing. It is a lot of work. That's all, you know. But
I suppose, you know, the thing is just, you know, it's largely a real world phenomenon, these separated communities. It's very difficult to do in an urban area, like the one I live in.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's not necessarily a rural thing. I never grew up. I was never in a rural. I grew up in the suburbs and in the city, and my communities are all based in Pennsylvania, New Jersey. They were not rural at all. They're all suburban. It's more of a commitment thing than anything.
Suburban, I guess. Suburban is. I guess I just didn't mean they're not urban, right? And you know, it really relies on having low housing prices.
They're definitely a real world thing. They don't go up just online. There was a lot of we met a lot. We had gatherings, praise and worship meetings, prayer meetings, and it was definitely face to face. That was definitely a key component of it. It wasn't just an online thing. Of course, this is before the internet anyway. So
yeah,
but that was a very essential component of it, was being together physically, at least like once a week. Just like going to church is important.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very sort of Catholic sacramental thing to do.
I think an important thing that we all need to start doing as Catholics, though, and this isn't really related to politics at all, but I really think we need to start praying the Rosary a whole lot more. And I mean,
an excellent idea.
I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, Our Lady of Fatima said that we need to start praying it daily. And I don't know about you all, but I definitely fail in that obligation myself many times. I've been stepping it up recently, of course, but it's still, it's still, to have to set time aside from your day to do other things that you would think of more fun, to set aside time for God. And I think although the praying the Rosary daily might seem a daunting task, I think it would do wonders for the Catholic movement. Particularly, I mean, Our Lady of Fatima said the world is, nearing a time where we'll need the Rosary, and it's important that we take solace in that, especially if we are to pursue the Benedict option.
Yeah, preach it. Yeah,
that's a
well,
good
and
point.
I would, and I would even argue that a greater adoption of the Liturgy of the Hours. I mean, the Rosary.
Yes, definitely.
I have nothing against the Rosary and nothing against the Liturgy of the Hours, but liturgy is liturgy. It's the official prayer of the Church. There's a reason why priests and deacons are obligated to pray it, and it is just, there are so many options for laity to adopt that.
I wanted to spread this word, guys. There's a free iPhone app, iBreviary, has a whole Liturgy of the Hours in there. Absolutely,
that's
free.
a great.
There's another one called Laudate that I use.
Yep.
Divineoffice.org. You can download all 7 hours of prayer a day, either text or audio.
And also, I have like ADD. I'm totally scatterbrained. I love the Liturgy of the Hours just because it's a different thing every day.
All Catholics in the watching right now, download something that lets you do the Liturgy of the Hours and start praying the Rosary daily. I can attest to you, part of the reason why I converted was the beauty of the Rosary. I mean, there are many factors, but part of it was definitely the beauty of the Rosary, and I'll never leave the Catholic Church because of it.
So we're coming up on the last 20 minutes of the live stream. I could let more people in. I'm kind of out of observations about this, I suppose. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. Perhaps we could talk offline or let more people come in. What do you guys think?
I'm
going to stay around.
Is there anybody? I mean, I'm staying, but is there anybody who's interested, who's Catholic and is interested in discussing this more?
Mostly it's Protestants, but
well, I'm always interested in discussing this sort of stuff more.
Sir, we could let you in, but you don't talk, so it wouldn't be helpful.
Okay, I'll for the last 20 minutes, I'll just open it up since I'm out of things to say. I think we had a pretty good discussion, and I liked how it ended on the rosary. I am thinking about doing a video on the rosary.
And hopefully I'd like to say too, I'm going to try to start my channel up in the next couple weeks. I've been talking about it a lot recently, and the distributor has been trying to help me learn how to use normie video editing software. But so I'm trying to, hopefully I'll have something out. You'll get to start hearing about politics from the mind of a 17-year-old Catholic convert. So hopefully that'll be interesting. I'd like for you to check me out once I start my channel. So let me just do my, that's my plugin. Sorry.
Yeah. I got to plug my channel too. I mean, I just started out too, and I just have a lack of time, but you guys want to check out my channel, it's Normie Gardner. Google Normie Gardner, go find it there. Yeah, I'm trying to do, I want to do videos on philosophy and some base core values things and just normal basic stuff. I want to do quick, and easy to digest videos. So if you guys
sorry, go ahead. Pardon me.
Just want to say I got one video up, and if you guys like it, want to go check it out. That's all.
Oh, definitely. Everyone should. I'll put the links. I'm really bad at updating descriptions after the live streams. I still have a bunch to do. But I wanted to say, it kind of reminded me, there seem to be some amount of like really radical reactionaries who are religious online. It's just kind of hooking them into a spiritual life that's anything connected to a real actual church seems to be a little bit difficult sometimes,
Speaking of radical reactionaries, hi everyone.
Oh no, it's everybody's favorite. It's everybody's favorite Prussian.
Hi.
Hey there.
Yeah, I'm. Can I introduce myself or?
Go ahead.
No, you can't.
Needs no introduction.
I'm almost, aside from maybe some of the people in the stream itself, I'm pretty sure most people that are watching this or have watched Distributor's channels know who I am. I'm Fritz Imperial. I run my own channel. I just uploaded a video a couple hours ago, but I'm sort of the reluctant, probably considering converting to Catholicism at some point soon. I've been starting to go to a Catholic church, but like I don't know. I mean, with this whole Benedict Option thing, I think the intention of it, or it almost seems like this is sort of the last option where it seems like modernity is becoming so depraved, and I certainly don't want, when I have children, to go to a public school or engage. Their interaction with the contemporary modern world is going to have to be very, very limited. But I think that just sort of putting our heads in the sand or trying to bury ourselves in a little bunker, out in the hills somewhere, I don't think that's either going to be very successful. And I also sort of think it's sort of failing the Great Commission that was left to the apostles and to Christianity. We're not meant to, completely isolate ourselves away from the world, but we're meant to engage with the world. Obviously not adopting its vices and its culture, but bringing people to Christianity. And I think that bringing Christianity to the people is more effective at converting people than letting them come here.
That's a great point, and there's something I'd like to say to reply to that is that there are actually. I mean, this is not the full answer, but keep in mind that for Catholics, we do have orders that just do nothing but contemplate the Eucharist all day long. Contemplative orders, they are called like the Mary option, Martha and Mary, or they just sit in the feet of the Lord. So keep that in mind too. But I don't think that we should stop evangelizing by doing the Benedict option. I don't think that's not an either or thing. I don't think that is really. I don't think it's a false choice there. I don't think we need to do that.
But I think with social and cultural retreat, I'm just not so sure that's probably I'm not so sure that's the best option we should be pursuing. I think there must be a more. Yes.
Well, I was going to say I will agree that we are called to we are called to be in the world, but you have to also take into account that the world also has an impact on us, and we can
No.
be. Well, you see my point. If you
Not
are
me,
constantly
you guys, yeah.
if you are constantly trying to impact the world, and you don't have a place to be your bedrock, your foundation to rejuvenate, it can just destroy you. It can destroy your faith, your
I don't think
worldview.
anybody was arguing for that. I mean, you were right when you say culture influences us or the church. Is that I mean, the Catholic Church itself is an excellent example of this, of something that managed to sort of carry over huge elements of the ancient Roman culture, such as the Latin language and many of the titles, like pontiff. Pontiff. I think pontiff was an ancient Roman title used for the position of like the chief priest, and
I think it was the emperor. Great job.
okay, yeah. I knew it was one of those positions, but yeah.
Just to be a stickler, no, it was the head. It was the chief priest. You're right.
Yes.
In Latin, Pontifex. Pontifex Maximus.
Of course, the Catholics didn't get the real Latin right because.
Okay, but let's move on here.
Sure.
Your point?
Oh, my point was that I mean, this has affected probably Protestants, I would say, coming from that background. I can say it's influenced it way more than it has Catholic or Orthodox churches. It's because of the fact that I have a whole video about this, in that you'll have I consider most of these sort of mainline Protestant churches, especially in like New England, like some Episcopalian church in Vermont that has like rainbow flags flying outside and some short-haired little, female quote-unquote pastor. These are basically just progressive country clubs for 60-year-old hippies.
Sure, but I'm not seeing
like that too. There's some Catholic parishes like that too.
This is sort of a feature of modernity, is you've got sort of these simulacrums of the religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get these simulacrums of various religions kind of repeating themselves as consumeristic products for various groups. This is obviously the danger. There's going to be a natural tendency for modernity to do that to most things it touches, outside of concerted resistance.
Yeah, I think that I actually don't think that's the biggest temptation right now. Honestly, I think that the liberal process, that's like a dying movement. I think that's from what I can see, and I think we have to be careful. Just one thing that we have to be careful. We're gonna go a more traditionalist bent, I think, in the future. I just think that the culture is gonna go that way. There's gonna be a reaction against this stuff, and we gotta make sure we don't go too far the other way too. We gotta stay on the right and the middle.
Well, that's interesting though, because I think that a lot of the hostility I've seen to the alt-right has been, I don't know, I'm thinking of a few things. I've seen a lot of knee-jerk reactionaries to the alt-right that have not been particularly charitable.
When you're going to finish
I think it's
proper critique of the what is it, the alt-right deserves a better
I've recorded the video series weeks ago. I just haven't had any editing time.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally off the topic. I think that, I think that the difficulty with criticizing the right, for Christians, is you get into this. The thing is that to a lot of liberal Christians, I'm alt-right, right? to a lot of moderate Christians, I'm alt-right. Like I think that there's huge problems with modern society that makes me alt-right. I think that equality is a false god that makes me alt-right.
We might not consider ourselves alt-right, and the alt-right might not consider us alt-right, but the mainstream culture might definitely call us alt-right.
I mean, this is my main. I mean, if I could ask Russell Moore, who's like he's sort of a big name in the Southern Baptist Convention, and he's been very big on. He's pro-life and anti-gay marriage, of course. But the thing is, he's sort of known for having a very sort of anti-Trump, very progressive on racial issues bend, even though he's a white Southerner. This is the sort of thing I've been criticizing. It's sort of the reason why I started my channel, is what I'm seeing as Christians sort of bowing down to progressives on the issue of race, thinking that they can sort of separate these various, intersectional aspects without, but it doesn't really work like that.
It's an incredibly easy phenomenon to understand, though, right? They've been doing this for years. They always do this. They cooperate with the Christians just to the left of everybody, and then they salami slice off, right? Boom, 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 boom. That's always how it works, right?
Well, guys, there's also, I'm speaking as someone who doesn't really like the alt-right that much, even though I don't agree with them at all, and I probably have been uncharitable to them.
I understand.
We
made clear that we're not all right.
I think you have to be careful too, because there's a Christian reason why you would be against racism in the sense. I'm not going to get into that right now. I don't care.
I just have to say,
but you have to. Yeah.
I really need
to get benefit from grandstanding on this. The left will use that.
I'm not trying to grandstand. That's what I'm trying to use my words very carefully.
This is what I've actually been trying to say on it, and what I'm trying to say about this is that what Christians need to understand is that racism is not the worst sin. And it seems like right now,
I'm not so sure that's really the operative thing.
It's something I've noticed. It seems.
I'm not a racist. Don't believe me.
I don't think that's even the issue. If it wasn't racism, it would be something else.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? If I could sit down with Russell Moore and ask him one thing, it would be, what are you going to do? Okay, you've denounced the alt-right. What are you going to do when the progressives start calling you alt-right for being pro-life?
I'm going to laugh at them.
Yeah, this is the function of this is how it's always worked, right? I think making criticisms of this idea are good. Grandstanding, on the body, and that is something that I think there's just a lot of dangers there. A lot of dangers because I don't know what The left is really fond. I know I've used this a lot. The left is very fond of using magic words, right? And once they can identify you as one of the bad people, they'll use it, right? But the problem is that these magic words don't have any definitions. They're just whoever the left doesn't like at a certain time, right? So if you go against something and it's not highly intellectual concept with the left, you're going to be that bad something tomorrow.
Hey guys, listen. This is a fascinating topic, but this isn't the stream to discuss it on. This is about the Benedict Option, not about the alt-right. Please stop discussing the alt-right.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, fine with me.
Sorry. Good call.
Sorry, that was just getting on my nerves. I'm stuck.
Yeah, I think
I thought we were talking about Catholicism and not.
No. It is totally about forming up communities. I think. I've said oftentimes, I think that, forming up communities, how do you use the modern tools to their maximum effectiveness, and how do you avoid the pathologies of modernity? Fire an intellectual scalpel.
Even more simply is just say you're part of a sort of more normie Catholic parish that, how do you even begin to try and, quote unquote, red pill them, or in the sense of start trying to create more, reactionaries within these communities, because there's already reactionary communities, but you can't just rely on these sort of pockets of, of reaction, across the country, because, there's a great talk that I think a lot of people should listen to by an Orthodox priest called Father Josiah Trenum, and his view on Catholicism. And, part of it, one of the biggest things that stuck out to me is sort of this thing that I recognize was probably true, is that he said, he lives in Southern California, so he lives in Sodom and Gomorrah, and he says he has a devout Catholic friend that is a neighbor of his, and he says he has to drive for hours past hundreds of Catholic churches in order to find one that's even halfway decent. And that's sort of been the difficult thing, is
your question how much you have to sacrifice to get to an Orthodox community? Or how do you make a less Orthodox community more Orthodox?
The latter. And that's the thing I think is something that needs to be focused on, because not everyone can drive several hours to get to an Orthodox Latin Mass church.
Yeah. I got a couple of things to say about that. I've worked in parishes a long time. I volunteered musically wise. Don't play rock music, I promise, but I do play music on a guitar at church. But the thing is that
First of all, this is not disagreeing with you. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just clarifying some things. Every Catholic church has Jesus in the sacrament, so every Catholic church has Jesus there. That's the first thing to keep in mind.
I know that.
And of course, you know that. I'm not trying to oppose you. I'm trying to keep going. You know, so if you're called to one place where you're gonna be like, if you're called to be in this parish which is near you, maybe you're called to fix that parish, and if you don't know how, you got to think about it. You have to work on it. There might be a way of fixing it. Maybe you're not there to get a refuge, but also to actually be the solution. I know it sounds so cheesy, but it's really is true sometimes. You know, like you just have to. Sometimes it's not an easy solution. You have to like you're not seeking one for what's good for you, but you're seeking what God wants you. You know,
wait. Continuing on that topic, I go to a very, as I mentioned earlier, you know, I go to a pretty normie parish. It's not, at least it's not like Jesuit levels of normie, but it is very normie. Like, I mean, it was normie enough that last Sunday I got condemned by my priest for taking communion on the tongue, on the knees, because that's a bad example.
That's ridiculous.
For the lay people, because I'm an altar server. But I do the incense. I'm a thurifer. Back in May, I believe, the seminarian who was like not interning, but like he was serving at our parish, like as part of his training. He's pretty trad, and he decided that on his last day of service at our parish, he was going to hold. He had our priest let him hold a mass in chanted Gregorian Latin. And it was probably the weirdest thing our church has ever done, because like it's never gone that trad before, and yet I was in the choir for that service because I wanted to chant. But we were all in the choir, and we all chanted like Adoro te devote as like the communion processional hymn, and I could tell everybody like the atmosphere was totally different from the normal rock mass that we usually get.
Good music can change it totally.
I mean, this has been the difficult thing, because I've been going to an Eastern Orthodox church that's like about a half-hour drive from me, and like it's like I don't know if this is true, but it feels like Orthodox churches don't really have that same sort of problem, because it's like this is super traditional, like traditional sort of Orthodox church where like, you know, like the idea that they'd have like rock music or like ironically enough, I don't actually really have that much of a problem with rock music, but like, you know, the idea that they would be very sort of normie and watered down the, you know, the divine liturgy, that seems like it would be an anathema to a lot of them. But I mean, what I'm saying is
it's unfortunate.
To bring this sort of back to like Rodri and the Benedict Option, from what I've heard about him, especially like what the Distributus has said about him, is that like, you know, like going from parish to parish, going, oh, this one isn't conservative enough, I'm going to go to this one, or this denomination isn't conservative, you know, this church is not conservative enough, I'm going to like switch, I'm going to convert to Orthodoxy now. I think that's the trap we need to avoid. We can't be like super picky and go, well, I don't like this church because it's not perfect, because you're never going to find a perfect parish or church.
So I think you answered your own question, right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to say I'm just trying to sort of like offer this as a point of advice, or something we need to think about, is the fact that you find a church that you believe in theologically, and you work with that church with that parish in order to make it better. You don't just sort of put your tail between your legs and run away. I mean, there's certain cases, of course, in which I think you don't really have any other option, where it's like, if the church is like actually having like rainbow flags outside, and like there's only like
so 50, every Episcopalian church.
Well, that
everybody leave the Episcopalian church now.
Keep in mind, we are talking about something inside a single church. So
yeah, but the thing is, there's even Catholic churches which are really, really, really bad. Even that, also the idea of like
theology of the Catholic Church is consistent. So the theological reasons for leaving them would not arise in your example.
Yeah, I want to clarify something too.
I understand that.
Go ahead, Nermi.
What I said before, the bottom line with Catholic churches is that a lot of it depends on the pastor. If you have a bad
I was about to say you have to have good priests. The biggest issue in the church right now is liberal clergy, and we have to fix that problem.
Kill James Martin.
How do you fix that problem?
Wholeheartedly.
I guess the question is, how do you fix that problem?
We have to educate.
Well, that might be.
We have to educate the Catholic youth. We have to educate the Catholic youth in an orthodox and stable manner. The way they are getting educated right now, as a person who is educated in my church and my parish's confirmation, they are not getting the church is not giving them the Catholic education that they need to be rooted in the faith. They receive a watered down sort of Protestantified version of the catechism that is not helpful to them in their daily life. The reason why I'm so orthodox is because I receive most of my information on the church from other sources through my own interest and personal research. What I learned at the church, I already knew. It was all just they don't teach you anything particularly interesting. They use normie materials to do it, and it's not interesting, and nobody cared. Half the time, every other student besides me was too busy talking to each other to even focus on what the message was in the video we were watching. The education that young Catholics are receiving right now is not nearly enough to keep them rooted in the faith for the next 20 years. They're all going to fall away from it eventually if this is what they're receiving. And I'm going to tell you, no, wait, let me finish. And I'm going to tell you that the majority of the people going into the clergy right now are going to retain those liberal views that they are receiving from the church. Very few Catholics who are going into the clergy right now have orthodox views on Catholic doctrine, especially here in the States and in the rest of America. I cannot stress it enough that right now the priesthood is in dire need for Orthodox priests, and unfortunately, I'm a youth in the church, and I'm a rarity. Most people think I'm the only person in our youth group, in our youth ministry at my parish who receives communion on the tongue, let alone on his knees.
I mean, this thing, and of course the fact that, like, have you seen this? There's an article recently where, like, somebody in the Vatican, some higher up in the Vatican, like, started saying that, like, conservative, because there's been a notice that a lot of Catholic converts are, like, generally very, very orthodox and very conservative. He was criticizing them because they dared to criticize the Pope, and he says he said that people that are, like, he's insinuating that Catholic conservative converts are mentally ill.
Yeah, I think that's a separate topic. That this was a document that came from a set of advisors to Pope Francis. But it's not to digress us. I think that I really like what Pius said. I think that a source of a sort of new restoration is the clergy.
So I'm not. Let me tell you the solution.
I guess let's do the bad ones. But the solution for the bad clergy is,
No. I just wanted to say the solution for the most part getting not good young men who are rooted in their faith is we have to have Orthodox people start teaching catechesis. Mm-hmm. People who are teaching catechesis at my parish are too busy trying to look hip and cool and teach a liberal, happy, fun times Catholic church. You have, and I'm not asking all of you to immediately go up and sign up to be a catechizer at your parish, but if you have Orthodox views, it is very important that you consider lending that knowledge to the Catholic youth of your parish, because what they're receiving right now, I can almost guarantee you, is not enough to retain the faith.
Well, and there's a reason for that, in that the parish is always going to be a second line of defense. Like the first line of defense is in the family, and the parish is only can be something that supports what's going on in the family. And so if you don't have parents that are educating their children in the faith, the parish, it can't plant seeds on concrete. So,
or to use the phrase from the movie Silence, nothing grows in a swamp.
I thought that, although Sterling, said that modernity might have a bell attached around its neck. Apparently, really bad priests don't have bells around their neck. So if you could identify people who are really, really unorthodox in their teaching, it might be their solution as well.
Well, that's the sort of slimy way people like James Martin get away with it, is that, like, he hasn't technically done anything that's unorthodox or that's heretical. He hasn't, like, performed a gay marriage, but I am almost convinced that huge numbers of Catholic priests in America, if they were allowed to do it, if they weren't, like, stigmatized, if they weren't kicked out immediately if they performed a gay wedding, they would do it. And it seems like the idea right now.
We can't ignore people like Cardinal Joseph Tobin, who went out and did an actual LGBT mass. I mean, good.
Well, we know there are abuses. I think the idea is how you confront those abuses, not just shaking your hands at the fact that they exist.
That is true.
They exist, right?
And unfortunately, none of us are in a high enough position of power in the church to do anything about corrupt cardinals.
Yeah.
You can
Plus,
you can
if you
We
look
need a
at,
new.
like,
I have about 95 reasons of what we could do, but
No,
You can
no.
volunteer. You can
Yeah, get
volunteer
outta
in
here.
church.
So, guys, we are almost on time. Does anyone want to close out the discussion with some final topic? Yeah, let's try to get things back onto the Benedict option. I guess I was really trying to mold this conversation about what we can do about modernity in a real sense. So maybe we could go around and ask what people think. Think that some things that they'd like to see, some different actions, right?
You want
Not
to go
to
left
stay
to
the
right?
course. What you can do to what different actions that you think people like us can do, or maybe people and you'd like to see happen, and we can just see what people have to say. Do you think that would be a good way to close out the stream?
Sure.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, let's start in reverse order with Sterling. Hello?
Okay. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for coming.
It was great. So again, I don't know. I'm just a simple philosopher, so it's very hard for me to. A lot of my ideas are kind of based around how we do apologetics, and I do think, and I do agree with the basic idea of the Benedict option. I think that we should try to form our own communities, and I think that we should try to somewhat extent, to do a route, as you said, like to put ourselves in more advantageous positions so we can better respond to the culture. And essentially, I think that my thought on apologetics, which supplements the Benedict option, is that it's for retaining people in the faith and not necessarily for converting all that many people. And so I think that those are the two basic ideas that we can do. The more people we retain, the more people we birth in, I think is the best way to promote the Catholic faith at this point.
Snake?
Well, yeah, I know I came in at the end, but it was an interesting conversation, and I suppose I can't add that much, but I will say this. I think people are very quick to have grand schemes of how, they're going to change the world, and I think really it comes down to individuals starting with themselves and starting with, first of all, having a firm understanding of their faith, studying their faith, studying their, I don't know, just getting their own life sorted out in a way, and then going from there in terms of, making connections. There has to be a large number of people who are passionate about their cause before you can, devise some scheme where we're going to create this, Catholic paradise or whatever. That's just too extreme, I suppose. That's what I would say. Start with yourself.
Pius?
I hate to be a broken record, but again, for me, the most important thing right now in the church is getting young Catholics properly educated in their faith, because they are not receiving
No, sorry, I said here.
Amen.
They are not receiving the education they need to hold the faith in their post-teen years. Sure, they're going to feel pressure from their family to maintain it up until they turn 18, but the moment they move out of the house, they're going to stop practicing that faith. Many of my acquaintances at my parish and other Catholic acquaintances in my real life obviously have publicly, or not even publicly, but they privately told me themselves that they have no intention of keeping the faith the moment they get out of their house. Catholics nowadays do not have, or young Catholics nowadays do not have the proper education to maintain their faith outside of their home, and they're not receiving that they to defend their faith as well. The moment they get it questioned, they don't have enough knowledge of it to really defend it. The most that you learn in Catholic in Catholic confirmation classes nowadays is go help the poor, because that's a good. And I'm not saying that's not a bad. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but that's not going to win them any debates. That's not going to keep them rooted in their religion. I mean, anybody can help the poor, but the confirmation should be less about. Should be less about mission work, and should be more about actually learning the faith. and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with mission work. I'm just saying that it needs to be redirected.
No, we get your idea. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in general, in conclusion, from me, I think that the Benedict option can be viable, but it needs a lot of work first before it can be implemented. Or the culture needs a lot of work first before it can be implemented. Sorry.
Excellent. Normie?
Hey, first, yeah, I'm here. Sorry, just had to. Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on. This is an awesome conversation. I just wanted to add one more thing to this. Is what I can add to is I want to urge all of you guys and everyone listening to not lose hope. All right, it's very easy to lose hope when you see all the negative things in this world. I talked a lot about hard work in this text. I want to reiterate just one thing: you do everything you possibly can in the best way you can, and then if when you know it's not enough, don't lose hope at that point. That's when you have to let a higher power do the rest of the work. So do not lose hope. That's the main thing I wanted to take away from this.
Awesome. Fritz?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say this is that I think that instead of a Benedict option in which Christians or Catholics basically head for the hills and become the Amish, I think being able to build islands of conservative Catholic Christian communities within the current world itself right now it will act as much better beacons of hope, and it won't cut us off from the resources and potential converts. I think that, I completely agree with Pius, is that educating young Catholics in the faith is something that is an absolute paramount right now. And I think that what we can do is in our parishes, in our churches, we can, is to see which avenues we can take to actually start engaging with the people of that church. And I think that, doing that is creating culture. And I mean culture as in, there's been many great Christian movies and whatnot, but it has to move beyond just having, this is a movie that's going to explain to you why Christianity is right. You have to have things that you have to have more things like Lord of the Rings, like the works of Tolkien. You have to have you have to have drama art, you have to have drama, comedy, science fiction, fantasy that's written by Christians that has an implicitly Christian, have inherently Christian themes, and they come from that point of view. But they can't just be banging you over the head of, this is how you become Christian, this is Christianity, We need more non-apologetic culture. Mm-hmm. And I think lastly, this was my last thought, was that you can't just keep having, you have to start getting Christians to understand that the modern world is not their friend, you can reject the progressives' ideas, you can reject the liberal and progressive narrative, and nothing bad's going to happen. And you can have them try and help them understand that at some point you have to choose between your faith and the modern world, and pretty much for any faithful Christian, the choice is very clear.
Benedict?
Yeah. Thanks, Dave, for thinking of me in this conversation. This has been welcome. Yeah, this has been good. Yeah, the as I was kind of mentioning earlier, I mean, my whole take on the Benedict option, having spent some being educated by the Benedictines for 3 years, and watching Rod kind of develop this whole Benedict option situation, that one of the weaknesses that I see with it is that if the Benedict option isn't about Benedict, if it's about having a meal and reading poems and doing all of this other stuff, and then it has nothing to do with Benedict, and it's a contradiction in terms. And so I think I tend to have a sort of a tighter definition of Benedict option. And the tagline on my blog is sort of explorations in domestic monastic living, and saying, okay, I've seen what this monastic life thing is like, more or less from the outside, but there's something there, and there's something there that as a non-cloistered person that I want to try and replicate in my life. And I think at the core, that's what the Benedict option is all about. So, my day starts with, some study and some Lectio Divina, and the Liturgy of the Hours when I can work it in. But it's like that's a daily habit, and it's the kinds of those kinds of things are things that we need to invest in first and foremost before we, develop some kind of program or ideology for, changing the world or fighting the progressives or, bashing the alt-right, or, I think there has to be a detachment from all of that political bullshit, quite frankly.
We need to have our houses built upon a rock.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be, a detachment from, a lot of this worldly stuff in order to, to build something lasting and to have something to hand on to our children. So one last shameless plug. I'm in the process right now of transitioning my blog from a more of a written blog format to a podcast. And so the podcast is hopefully going to launch here in the early part of September. And it'll be profiles of people who are to one degree or another doing this, either inside the cloister or outside of it. So
excellent.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I guess the whole theme is, what am I trying to do? And it's, the blog and hopefully soon the podcast, and really trying to connect the dots with a lot of stuff that's going on out there. I mean, the Benedict Option's a piece of it. I just finished recording a couple of conversations with people I went to school with, and people that are really out there doing this stuff. And Saint Benedict, to one degree or another, is at the center of it all. And so, anotherbenedict.org is the place to go if you want to connect with me or more.
Can I say one more thing before we start?
Oh, sure.
So once again, I'm going to plug myself. I'm Pius. I'm going to be starting a YouTube channel soon. Hopefully, I'll be able to discuss church politics and regular politics as well. I hope you'll check me out once I start. And then now that I'm done with the plug, I want to tell everybody, all the Catholics in the chat, all the Christians, please pray the rosary. Start praying the rosary daily. Try to fit it in whenever you can. It's important that we keep prayer in our lives, and that we meditate on the mysteries of the rosary, as Our Lady of Fatima said. We're entering a tough time. Modernity is going to be very difficult for us to deal with. We have to keep solace in the Blessed Virgin. That's a must for the coming years.
Excellent. I think I can't actually top that. I was going to say something about how we need to think out the box and experiment with radical ideas, but I think I'll just leave it at praying the rosary, since there's no way I can top that. At any rate, guys, thanks for joining the live stream. I know this is very different from my usual content, but everyone out there who's a secularist, keep watching. You'll see other things as well. At any rate, have a wonderful night. We'll end there. Bye.
Thanks.